This is the ultimate beginner's guide to saw blades. It can seriously be confusing when you first start woodworking as to what type of blade you need for what cut you're going to be making. Let me clear it up for you. If you're shopping for saw blades in a store or online, a lot of times you'll see little symbols or letters beside the tooth count. So you'll see an 80 and then you'll see ATB or FTG. All that does is tell you what type of teeth are on that blade. ATB just means that the teeth are beveled alternately. So you'll see one tooth will be slanted one way, one tooth the other. Sometimes you'll have a flat tooth mixed in with the alternative teeth. FTG just means that all the teeth are flat. So it's going to cut really smooth. It's going to be a flat cut. You may even see something like a triple chip grind. All that means is basically it's got two beveled edges and a flat top. So really that kind of stuff really isn't going to matter in your case picking out your first blade. Don't let that stuff confuse you. There's a lot of other things on a saw blade that really as a beginner doesn't matter, like tooth angle or some of the other acronyms that you're not going to care about just buying your first blade or one of your first blades. Another thing that's confusing to a lot of beginners is kerf. What does kerf mean? Kerf is just how thick the blade is. So in other words, how wide of a cut it's going to make when it passes through the wood. This is a full kerf blade, meaning it's about an 1/8 inch thick. They make a thin kerf blade, and it just means it's going to take less material. And on underpowered saws, in other words, contractor style saws, it doesn't take as much power to push that through material. So sometimes they work better on stuff like the Delta saw I had, or even a bench top style saw. So one of the first considerations you have to make on blades is what tooth count do you want? You can go 24 tooth, 50 tooth, 80 tooth, 96 tooth. They're all over the board. So which one do you choose as a beginner? My recommendation for beginners is to start with a combination blade, which means it's about a 50 or 60 tooth, and it's good for ripping and cross cutting. So imagine if you've got this 2x6 and you're going to cut this. When you rip cut something, you cut it with the grain, so along the length of the board. If you're going to cross cut something, you're going across the grain or across the width of the board. My personal preference is this CMT 60 tooth. It's a combination blade so I can cross cut and rip cut. It works good for sheet goods like plywood, MDF. It also works good on pine. It also works good on hardwoods. It's just a good all-around blade. I bought this with my own money. I used this blade on my old Delta table saw. It performed extremely well. I've used it on the saw stop, so a lot more powerful. It still performs extremely well. If you want to give CMT blades a try, go to TayTools.com, use code 731CMT10 at checkout, and you'll be able to save 10% on any CMT blade. I'll actually drop a link in the description to this exact blade. If you're going to change the saw blade on your saw, make sure it's unplugged. Some saws, like this one, you have to use 2 wrenches to change the blade. Careful not to drop the nut down in there. You'll never find it. There's usually a washer and a nut that you have to remove. You'll slide the blade off, take the new blade, and make sure the teeth are facing you. If you go this way, it's backwards. Some saw blades have a button that you'll push that'll lock the blade from moving, and then you'll be able to hold the button and then use the wrench to remove the nut. When you tighten the blade, just snug. Don't over tighten them. Don't under tighten, but don't really wrench down on it. Just get it good and snug. If I was going to rip cut this piece, in other words, cut it just like we have it laying here, all the way through the blade, and I had to raise that blade up as high as possible to get it all the way through that cut, I would choose a lower tooth count, like this 24 tooth, because it doesn't have to work as hard to remove that material. If I want a good clean cross cut, or even a rip cut, on a smaller piece like this is hard maple. If I'm going to be cutting it across the grain, then I would use my 60 tooth blade. If you want an even finer cut, you can go up from there to an 80 tooth or even higher. 60 tooth for most people is going to be the sweet spot. When it comes to the miter saw, I think a higher tooth count is best. When it comes to the table saw, I don't necessarily think that just because it's a higher tooth count means it's a better option. I've used a bunch of different makes and styles of saw blades over the years, and I just keep going back to the combination blade that's about a 50 or 60 tooth blade. It works well in most applications. Most combination blades are going to have that alternative top bevel. As you can see here, each blade is beveled at a different angle. So this one goes a little to the left, this one goes down to the right. Whereas the flat top or the flat blades, all of these teeth are flat, so that's going to create a flat cut. There's no bevel in any of them. I'll make a few passes with this alternative tooth and then a flat tooth, and I'll show you the difference. So you can see cutting a groove or a dado with an ATB blade, it's going to leave those little grooves or marks in your wood. That joint's not going to be as tight if you were to put another piece in there. Especially from this angle, you'll be able to see those little ridges where the blade didn't cut it flat. Here's where you really see a difference between the flat grind and the alternate top bevel. This is the ATB, so you can see those ridges in there, and then this is a flat. It's a perfectly smooth, flat cut. You may see blades like this, especially in your home stores. You'll see Irwin, you'll see Spider, you'll see Diablo, those type blades. If you cut a lot of dados or half laps, things like that, like you see on this X-Base coffee table here, where I actually half lap the X's so that they fit together and locked into place. You can use a dado stack to help you clean out that material extremely fast, because these things stack together and basically make a wide blade. Now, not all table saws accept a dado stack. You'll have to check with yours to see if the arbor or that bolt in there that the blade goes on is long enough to actually hold these blades. This is actually a relatively inexpensive set. I've had this for quite a while and actually have a whole video on this dado stack. If you want to see how they work and how this one performs, I'll link that in the description below. I know I've talked about CMT blades a lot because that's what I use and I like them a lot. However, really a Diablo blade is extremely good also. I've used them for years. I still have this one, and this is a 96 tooth. Use it on the miter saw. It works extremely well. I like Diablo blades for the value and the length. Now, a CMT blade, in my opinion, lasts a lot longer as far as before it needs to be replaced or resharpened in some cases. These Diablo blades, while they can be resharpened, a lot of times they're just at that price point where you just toss them. But I still think they're really good quality blades, especially for the price. When I first got my miter saw, I was using the blade that come with it. If you're still doing that, stop it. Them things ain't no good, y'all. Now, this is serviceable for rough construction. That's what they're meant for. This is a 32 tooth blade, so the lower the tooth count, the rougher the cut, the higher the tooth count, the more finer the cut. So changing the blade on a miter saw is actually really simple. Most all of them will have some type of blade lock switch that you push in. That's going to lock the blade. You'll have to raise this up. Don't forget to unplug it. And then you'll remove the guard or actually loosen the bolt. Push the guard up so you can actually get to that bolt there to unloosen it. As far as miter saw blades go, I prefer a higher tooth count because a miter saw is a cross-cutting machine. That's what you're doing with it. Unless you're cutting construction grade lumber a lot for framing and like rough construction, then you can get away with a lower tooth count like a 32 tooth because the cleanliness of the cut really doesn't matter at that point. That's what that 80 tooth is perfect at, those smooth cross cuts. When you start thinking about cutting sheet goods, MDF, plywood, melamine, stuff like that, you want a higher tooth count in most cases. I find that the 60 tooth combination blade works perfectly fine for all the sheet goods I've been cutting here lately. If you want a cleaner cut, then 80 tooth or above will be your best bet for most sheet goods. Another thing to be aware of is arbor size. So this is a miter saw blade, this is a table saw blade. So the arbors, or the bolt that holds the blade on, are different sizes usually on a table saw versus a miter saw. So this is like a 5/8 inch arbor. This is a 1 inch arbor. Just make sure that you look at your saw. You can just measure it or look on your paperwork that you got with your saw, see what size arbor it is, and just make sure you're getting the right size arbor or the right size hole in the blade. You don't want to get the blade home and it don't fit. If your blade isn't cutting as good as it used to, making a little mess out of your cuts, don't throw it away just yet, or don't even send it to have it resharpened. See that dark stuff there? That's pitch. Especially when you're cutting softwoods like pine, it builds up pretty quick. Picked up this on Amazon. I'll link to that in the description below. Just make sure you put something down so it doesn't get everywhere. Just spray it on there and let it sit for a few minutes. After it's set for 5 minutes or so, I like these stainless steel brushes. You can pick those up on Amazon as well. But it really helps get that pitch out of there. You won't believe how much better a clean saw blade will actually cut. It's night and day. It's like putting a new blade on your saw after you clean it. If your saw blade isn't cleaning as well before you spend the money on the new one, pick up some cleaner and clean it regularly. That'll work. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite brand of blade is. I know a lot of people really like Diablo blades. I do too. CMT are a notch above that in my opinion. What's yours? You may even see something like a triple chip grind. This is the ultimate vinegar. I have no idea why I kept this blade, but I've still got it. I keep it in a drawer. I never use it. If you're looking to upgrade your blade from your stock blade that come on your saw, which you should immediately, because those are typically hot garbage. They're not good at all. They're just meant to, yeah, you can cut something maybe, hopefully. If you want to see more information about how that dado stack works, click that box right there. Clicking that box gets you the big old virtual fist bump. Also, another one of my favorite blade videos right there.